Welcome to the Elections Economic Development Roundtable presented by 3+ Corporation and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. My name is Susie Campos and I'm the CEO for 3+ Corporation. I'm joined by my colleague, John Wisher, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. This is the second of 3 roundtables that our 2 organizations will present to provide a platform for important election issues for both the business community and for the candidates running September 14th provincial election. Today's roundtable centers around innovation, in particular on biotechnology and artificial intelligence and the opportunities for Greater Moncton in this sector, and how the province can be a partner to grow this sector in our economy. With us today is Dr. Moulay Akaloufi, who is currently a professor of computer science at the Université du Moncton and the head of the Perception, Robotics and Intelligent Machines Prime Research Group, and Dr. Rodney Wallet, director and president of the Atlantic Cancer Research Institute, as well as the founding director of the Molecular Diagnostics Laboratory at the Dr. George Dumont University Hospital. Currently, he's also adjunct professor at the Université du Moncton. Welcome, Dr. Wallet and Dr. Akaloufi. Bienvenue à la table ronde des élections sur les sujets du développement économique, présenté pour la Corporation 3+ et la Chambre de commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Je m'appelle Susie Campos et je suis la PDG de la Corporation 3+. Je suis accompagnée de mon collègue John Wisher, PDG de la Chambre de commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Il s'agit aujourd'hui de la 12e table ronde. Il y aura 3 en total, que nous 2 organisations présenteront afin de fournir une plateforme pour les questions électorales importantes, pour le monde d'affaires que pour les candidats qui se présentent aux élections provinciales du 14 septembre. Les tables rondes aujourd'hui sont centrées sur l'innovation, en particulier sur la biotechnologie et l'intelligence artificielle. Les porteront également sur les possibilités qui s'effondrent au Grand Moncton dans ces secteurs et sur la façon dont la province peut être un partenaire pour faire croître ces secteurs dans notre économie. Avec nous aujourd'hui, nous avons Dr. Moulay Akaloufi, qui est actuellement professeur de l'informatique à l'Université du Moncton et chef du groupe de recherche sur la perception, la robotique et les machines intelligentes. Et Dr. Rodney Wallet, directeur et président de l'Institut Atlantique de recherche sur le cancer, ainsi que le directeur fondateur du laboratoire de diagnostic moléculaire, les hôpitaux universitaire Dr. George Dumont. Depuis, elle est également professeure adjointe à l'Université de Moncton. Bienvenue, Dr. Wallet and Dr. Akaloufi. I just want to remind everyone that you can put your questions in the chat box or in the question and answer section, and we will review all questions at the end of both presentations. Again, welcome, Dr. Wallet and Dr. Akaloufi.
Thank you, Susie. So I will be starting. So welcome everybody. I will talk today about the artificial intelligence research at Université de Moncton. As you can see in the first slide, here are the topics that we work in our group. We are mainly interested in deep learning techniques, computer vision and imaging. Robotics, we have some work related to industrial robotics, but also to drones, and optimizing the performance using high performance computing. And applications are various. We have some applications in security and defense. We have done some work recently with Defense Canada in the medical area. I will show some examples in the fintech and in the industry in general. So I will be starting my presentation. Yeah. So the area of interest in the perception, robotic and intelligent machines research group is machine learning in general. As I said, we have some work in deep learning and we do also some like predictive analytics using big data. We have some work in natural language processing, and we optimize the algorithms to work at the edge. For example, if you have some smart sensors or Internet of Things sensors, you can optimize the models and deploy them on the field at the edge. We have some work also related to computer vision, and it involves medical imaging. I will show some examples. Biometrics, for example, face recognition for security, and some work related to machine vision and industrial vision. I will also talk about one example in this field. And in the robotics area, we have started works in the drones sector, but also we are interested in industrial robotics. And in general, we are interested in the autonomy, to make the machines autonomous, like, for example, for the UAVs, having the autonomous navigation and this navigation as safe as possible. So the area of application are various. For example, we have some work in the manufacturing area, in the food sector. I will show an example, an industrial application, wood, doors, windows, etc. We have some work in the fintech area. I will not talk today about the fintech, given that we have a limited amount of time, but we have some work in the insurance sector with some companies, and also related to human resources, team performance, and project management, and also in finance. We have also some work in the healthcare sector. I will give some examples about the medical imaging work that we are doing. And one of the works, in fact, is done with the Atlantic Cancer Research Institute with the team of Dr. Wallet, who will talk more about that. And as I said, we have some work in defense and security. We are involved in some work related to social media moderation with a company in Kelowna, in British Columbia, dealing with the detection of child pornography online, and with the detection of cyberbullying, hatred messages in text messages or in social media messages, like, for example, in Twitter, Facebook, etc. And also with in video surveillance and crowd behavior to detect violence, for example. And also the other area involved many things like sport rehabilitation and telecommunication. We have currently 4 projects with Ericsson Canada related to telecommunications. So I will, in this presentation, given that we have limited time, I will talk specifically with one industrial application that we are doing, and we are building the full prototype close to the commercialization. The company involved, or our industrial partners, will commercialize the application, and the work we are doing in the medical area. So for the industrial application, in fact, one of the projects we are doing is with the Pathway to Innovation, and it's about quality control and lobster processing. As you know, this area needs a lot of human resources, as you can see in the picture. And we have seen recently that there is a lack of these persons if we are not able to bring them from outside Canada. And we need to optimize and to automate this sector to be more competitive in the future. So we are working in the developing machine to process lobsters. So the idea here is to detect important features using 3D computer vision and using deep learning techniques to locate parts of the lobster for further cutting and processing. So we will, at the end, you start with lobster in a bin, a living lobster, and you have the meat at the end, for example. And of course, we are working on optimizing the code to work on an embedded machine close to the camera. So instead of using a large computer, the idea is to optimize and use a smaller embedded computer, which is located close to the camera and with interaction and communication with the robot. We are using 3D vision, and you can see here an image of a lobster captured by 3D camera. Here we have both 2D images and the 3D images, and we can see a lot of details when we scan with the 3D camera this kind of product. Of course, since the lobsters can vary in size, in width, etc., so the 3D becomes very important. So to manipulate the lobster without damaging them. So some of the detection, I will not show all the detection, but for example, you need to locate the straps here in yellow and to automatically cut them. You need to locate the different part of the body, like the tail, the body, the head, etc. And we use deep learning. So the techniques that we are using is deep object location, optimized for this kind of detections. And we have very good result on that. With 3D cameras, we are able also to compute all the dimensions of the lobster, so we can manipulate the product without damaging the product. So we compute the height, the length, the width, etc. And of course, you can see an image of a manipulator for these products specifically. The gripper available commercially are not useful, and we need to also design a new gripper. The company, the industrial partner, is working on that. So he designed a specific gripper for this type of applications. So as I said, the idea here is really to build a prototype. We have a small prototype close to the one shown here in the picture at University of Moncton. So we have a small test bed with the robot, cameras, convoyers, etc. So we are mimicking what will happen in the plant. And the idea is from the living lobster from the bin, you have the processed lobster with the meat and all other parts of the lobster to be commercialized. And I will talk now about the medical imaging applications that we have. So we have different ones, but I will talk specifically with the two main ones. The first one is related to eyes diseases. And here you can see, for example, the percentages of the diseases that cause blindness in the developed world. And you have among them the age-related macular degeneration, which counts for 50%. You have diabetic retinopathy, which counts for 17%. We are dealing with these two ones right now, shown with the blue arrows. And we are working right now with the glaucoma, so to get the other 18% of these diseases, to detect them automatically using artificial intelligence. And you can see in the right of the slide, what we try to detect. We try to detect, for example, the diseases caused by diabetes at different levels. So like diabetic macular edema, which causes this kind of holes in the retina. And for AMD, we detected different stages, like drusen, for example, where you have some debris accumulating below the retina in the choroidal area, and also the severe level or the severe grade of this disease when you have accumulation of blood vessels, which we call neovascularization. So the first one is about diabetic retinopathy. The idea is when you go visit your optometrist to change your glasses, or if you go visit the ophthalmologist, from the picture of the retina, we can detect the level of or the grade of the retinopathy. So the idea here is to build a deep learning model that is capable to detect all the features like hemorrhages, hard exudate and soft exudates, and microaneurysms. These are signs of the level of diabetic retinopathy. But instead of extracting the features, we build an architecture, a deep neural network architecture, and modified it to work specifically for this kind of diseases. And we are able to output the 4 grades. In fact, there are 5 grades, but in general, the mild and normal are put together. So we follow the same protocol. So, and we have the 4 grades: normal, moderate, severe, and proliferative. and the results are outputted at the probability of one of these, and we can also compute the probability of what we call referable diabetic retinopathy and vision-threatening diabetic retinopathy. So you can see here, for example, in addition to the detection of the disease and the probability of the level of the disease, we are able to highlight the signs of the disease, what we call explainability, because in the healthcare sector and also in security, they ask us to explain the detection, not only to give the result, even if the results are impressive, but also to explain why this decision was made. And you can see here that we have developed an architecture that is capable of highlighting the signs of the disease. So every time you have a result, you have this heat map, the heat map in the middle that give you the area where to look for the signs of the disease. And this is mainly for healthcare professionals, because the idea here is to have a computer-aided diagnosis, and the health professional, the physician, ophthalmologist, or optometrist will check if the results are correct and can have this image to see where to look for the signs of the disease. So for diabetic retinopathy, here we have a brief overview of the results. We have 4 grades detection: normal, mild, together, moderate, severe, and proliferative. We have a metric of performance that we use is area under curve, which is compromised between the true positive and the false positives. So this is the performance used in general in healthcare or in a medical area when we compute the performance of our algorithms. So we have a performance of 98.6% with tests in more than 80,000 images. You can see here specificity and sensitivity. These 2 metrics are important for healthcare professionals. We are at 97% and 95%. And for referable diabetic retinopathy, we have a performance of 98%, and for vision-threatening 99%. And as I said, we can precisely locate the signs of the disease, which is an interesting thing in this kind of applications. As I said, we have worked also with in detecting diabetic macular edema and AMD. For these ones, we use, instead of the retinal images, the retinal fundus image, we use what we call OCT, or optical coherence tomography. This kind of equipment are available when you visit the optometrist for changing glasses, or when you visit the ophthalmologist, and you have like the 3D picture of the retina. And we have developed a model to detect these different types of diseases, like choroidal neovascularization, the diabetic macular edema, the drusen, and also detecting the normal cases. So we're able to output these 4 classes when you input the image to the model. And in addition, as you can see in the last row, we have the signs of the disease highlighted. So the health professional can check visually and confirm the diagnosis given by the algorithm. And here again, briefly the result, we have a performance of 99.8%, which is very high performance, and the tests were done on more than 80,000 images. Specificity and sensitivity are very high. In this case, we have 98.7 and 98.4. And as I said, we can precisely locate the signs of the disease with a very good performance, as you can see in the values of the performance given here. So given the performance of this system, we are now deploying the system on our website. primeai.ca is the website of our research group. And we will put the model so it can be used by health professionals. We have some people interested in trying this model, given the performance of the model. So we will start soon deploying and giving access to healthcare professionals to use it and tested clinically so we can benchmark the solution in a real life situation. Another work we are doing in the area of medical imaging is the AI for radiology. So for example, here we have chest x-rays, and as you can see in different images, we have different labels corresponding to different diseases, for example. And the idea here is to, when you have this kind of images, you can input it to the algorithms, and the algorithm can give you the result related to this kind of diseases. For example, if the first image, we can detect the cardiomegaly, enlarged cardium, and detect the opacities and atelectasis. So you see the possibility of using this, for example, for radiology. You can have a lot of images captured and sent to the algorithm, and you have your output with the result. And of course, the health professional or the radiologist will confirm these diseases, for example. And for this work, we have used more than 224,000 images coming from 65,000 patients tested on frontal and lateral images. We have 14 observations. And sometimes, as you have seen in the images, we have different observations in the same image. So we can detect, for example, as I said, pleural effusion, edema, cardiomegaly, etc. Some of the observations are uncertain because the radiologists were not, because this observation were confirmed by 4 radiologists, but in some cases they didn't agree on the observation, so it's put as uncertain. So the algorithms have to deal with this. So the average performance is 96%. And as I said before, we used what we call area under curve. It's a metric used for performance in medical images and in other areas, but medical images in particular. We have an overall average of 96%. And you can see in some diseases like pleural effusion, cardiomegaly, and edema, and pneumonia, we have very high results. So we are able to detect these diseases with high performance. And the lowest one are the no findings. And in this case, we have some cases where it is uncertain. So we don't know exactly if we are really 93% or above that, and also the pneumothorax. But still, the results are very high. So, and with this experience, we have used these tools to detect COVID-19 signs in chest X-rays. We are doing this work with the Montfort University Hospital in Ottawa, and we have very interesting results now. You can see here some tests. At the same times of outputting the result, we are able to output the explainability, as I showed for the retinopathy. So you can see, for example, in the images in the middle, in the upper part is the chest X-ray, and in the lowest part are the explainability, where we have highlighted the areas where the signs of diseases are located. And you can see we have done two tests. At my left, we have tested COVID as a class by itself compared to other type of pneumonia and normal cases, and we have sensitivity of 95% and specificity of 96%, and the curve shows an area under curve of close to 98% performance. At my right, you have the test we have done where we detect pneumonia, because COVID give signs that looks like pneumonia, and in fact it's a viral pneumonia. And when we try to detect pneumonia versus normal cases, we improve our performance, and we have sensitivity of 98% with specificity of 92%. And the area under curve, the curve is close to perfect. We have 99.65% of performance on detecting the signs of COVID-19 using CXR. So as I said, we in addition to the original image, we input and highlight where to find the signs of the disease. The idea here is to give an output to the health professional and the physician that will have a look to these images and confirm the disease, because it's not a diagnosis tool, it's just a computer aided uh, diagnosis tool. It's not diagnosis by itself, but you will need an input from or confirmation from the health professional. And we have deployed the system. It's working now, and it's available freely in this website, COVID-19 Prime AI.ca. And we are building another website that will be only accessible by healthcare professionals like our colleagues of Montfort Hospital, which whom we are working right now on detecting COVID-19 with X-rays. And last project is, as I said, is in the area of using multiomics, like such as genomics, proteomics, for example, to detect some types of cancer. And this work is done with, in collaboration with Dr. Rodney Wallet. So he will be presenting next, so I'll let him talk more about this project. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaloufi. And I just have a quick question even before we continue. The images for detecting the coronavirus that you showed us, is that technology being used right now by health professionals?
Yeah, it's our partners in Hôpital Montfort Hospital in Ottawa. They are using, and in fact, we are right now improving the algorithms to make them work in the clinical settings. And that's the next step. And we will start, of course, with the Montfort Hospital, because we started with them this summer. And of course, the website is available for everyone to use. But we can deploy it specifically. We build what we call Docker. It's container that can deploy it locally if someone needs. So of course we are open to share it with other health professionals. And as I said, it's not diagnosis. You will need a health professional to confirm anyway, because it's an important thing here to make sure that really you have or you don't have this disease based on this output. But it doesn't replace the important thing. It doesn't replace the laboratory test that we are using right now. It's just to improve the flow in the hospital. For when you screen for CXR, for X-rays, you have the result immediately. When you do the laboratory test, I think now it's about 24 hours to get the results. So you can decide right now, but you have to wait for the laboratory test for confirmation.
Okay, well, great. You know, it's incredible that we have this type of technology and the things that UDM is putting together. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rodney Wallet for his presentation.
Screen. Do you see my screen, Susie?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So thank you, Susie and John, for the invitation. My presentation, just to give you an idea where I'm going, the first third will be on work we're doing in probably our major development area, which is liquid biopsy, and how that intersects with artificial intelligence, as Dr. Kaloufi just talked about. Second part of the presentation is going to be switching gears a bit and talking about the economic impact of R&D using ACRI as a case study, and what is the potential for this for the province going forward, and where are we situated in the Canadian and global landscape in terms of investments in R&D. So let me start here if I can get things going. So our most active area of research for the past decade or so has been the area of liquid biopsy. And really the challenge in liquid biopsy is making sense from the noise. Liquid biopsy in its simplest definition is taking a biological sample like plasma or urine and looking in that material to see if we can get indicators of a particular disease. In our case, obviously, we're very interested in cancer. Now, for the past 40 years, people have been trying to use liquid biopsy or blood samples to get as much information as they can. And it's a huge challenge. There are tens of thousands of different components in plasma, and trying to make sense of which component comes from which cell type and understanding what it means is a huge, huge challenge. It's really like looking at white noise when you're in that format. So obviously there are cells, there are proteins, there's nucleic acids, every possible component coming from a biological cell is present there. So what we've been focusing on for the past decade is a small little particle that cells produce. It's almost virus-sized in particle in size, and these things are called exosomes. They're also called microvesicles or extracellular vesicles, but I'm going to use the terminology exomes for today. So why are these exomes interesting? Well, people have started calling exomes the Twitter of the cell. So cells put out these little particles to communicate with other cells. And the means of communication basically is a facsimile of what the cell is actually doing. So whatever mutation or protein expression or changes a cell has, it gets reflected and transferred into these exosomes. And these exosomes flow freely in our biological fluids. So if you can tap into these messages, you can get a good idea of the cell that is producing it, so the parent cell. And one thing that we found over the past decade is cancer cells produce a lot of these. So when you look at blood or urine, you're getting an over-representation of what the cancer is doing in the body by looking at these specific particles called exosomes. So for the past decade, kind of serendipitously, we were able to develop an initial technology that allowed us to get a very robust, clinically amenable protocol to be able to isolate these particles from blood. Typically, the protocols that would give us these exosomes would take hours and require sophisticated equipment. But with this peptide that was developed, we found that it had affinity for these exosomes, and we're able to pull them out very quickly with a minimal lab equipment and time. This first technology, the one that you see presented here, was licensed to an American company. The product is being sold on the market as we speak, and subsequently we licensed this technology to a European company who's now developing diagnostic tests. So it's out the door. We use it, but now increasingly researchers and clinicians are using this technology to get at this information. Subsequently, we were able to develop two other technologies that are in various degrees of the patent process. One involves polysaccharides like chitosan, which is found in the shells of crabs and lobsters. There's also a synthetic molecule that we found has affinity for exosomes as well. So that's kind of our IP portfolio going forward in this field. Now, how do we use these exosomes for a cancer patient? So basically what we're doing is we're doing essentially the same thing that is being done on a tumor biopsy, but taking liquid to be able to perform that analysis. So we're developing personalized assays that will look at mutation status, protein status, methylation status, all the important biological changes that can give us insight on a particular disease. Now, why would we use blood when we can use tumor? That question is one that we get asked very often, and the advantages of using blood are manyfold. First of all, it's minimally invasive. Sometimes the tumor is not accessible. Sometimes the tumor was removed and you don't have easy access to it. So with a blood sample, you can gather these samples every time you see the patient. So monitoring in real time what's going on as the patient is going through their treatment trajectory. So getting information on early diagnosis, if we can get a sample early enough, but then deciding which therapy to offer, what is the particular prognosis of the patient, and following treatment response as the patient is getting either chemotherapy or immune therapy. So we can detect if the disease is coming back, if it's changing during treatment, so we can then make adjustments in real time to better treat this patient. So when you look at exosomes compared to other formats that are out there, no other liquid biopsy format can provide all the readouts in one sample. So we can get displays on all these parameters, which can be useful in different contexts. And what we found recently is some of these parameters are important not only for cancer, but other types of disease like Alzheimer's disease and like ALS. So we're spreading our wings into other fields using this technology as well. And hopefully it'll allow us to better predict the interplay between the host and the disease. So a lot of new treatments coming out involved immunotherapy, and that's the immune system that is reactivated to recognize the disease. Hopefully we'll be able to gain some insight as well into how a person is going to respond when these new drugs are given. So typically what we do in a protocol design is we try and get these liquid biopsy samples at each important time point. So as soon as we can during when we suspect there's disease, and then after each important step in the process, post-surgery, post-treatment, and then if the disease progress or relapse, we get samples as well. So we've got a very broad snapshot of the steps that are occurring while the patient is undergoing therapy. So what we can see is, a very important thing is early we can see markers that are very predictive of the presence of disease, and then after intervention like surgery or chemotherapy, we see these markers drop. Hopefully they drop down to 0, and then hopefully they'll stay at that level for as long as possible. But if by chance after a few years we see reappearance of a clone or a mutation, we know that the disease is relapsing. And this can occur months, even years before techniques like CT scans or x-rays can detect the disease. So it's really keeping an eye on our patients long-term as they fight the disease, hopefully as they defeat it. But if they relapse, getting it sooner will give us more opportunities to initiate new therapies. So as we gather information from these exosomes, it becomes a massive undertaking. We get DNA, we get RNA, we get proteins, metabolites, epigenomics, and each of these formats or these silos generates billions of data points. And at one point, if we want to start looking at things globally, looking at things across these different omic platforms, we start to maximize our ability to do it with simple bioinformatics tools. And that's where talking and working with computer scientists in artificial intelligence and machine learning becomes very useful. So we're at this early step here with working with Dr. Akloufi in providing the data, the big data, that we can then use tools of machine learning to start to make sense of what biology is telling us, and then hopefully to identify signatures which will help us make better therapeutic decisions for our patients going forward. So this is a huge undertaking. It requires many patient samples and lots of very sophisticated types of analysis, but we feel this is the future of medicine, and we're hoping to make a contribution in this field going forward. Just to give you an idea how fast liquid biopsy is growing, I pulled this out a couple of years ago. These are market analysis, and these fields are growing at a staggering pace, and the potential, because it's global, is very, very great if someone can find the answers and reach market in these fields. So that slide is my segue to go more into the economic analysis of R&D. Recently, David Campbell at Jupia Consultants prepared and presented a report to us showing what the economic impacts of ACRI are, and using ACRI as a case study for all of New Brunswick, and how are we doing in this area, and what could we do to be better than we are right now. So I'll walk you through some of these slides. So the objective of the study was to look at the economic impact, including direct, indirect, and induced economic activity. So overall, what this report attempted to do was to show what an organization like ACRI is contributing to the R&D sector in the province of New Brunswick by looking at outputs like GDP, employment, and consumer spending. So in the study, this was a surprise to us looking at the Atlantic region. ACRI is one of the 4 largest private not-for-profit research organizations. In the last fiscal 2019, we and our collaborators generated $6 million in annual revenue and employed approximately 65 to 70 workers. The number is always a little vague because we have students that come and go, so it's never a hard number. So in terms of size, since 1998, we've grown significantly from 150 square feet, basically a closet, to 22,000 square feet. And again, that makes us one of the largest footprints in R&D in Atlantic Canada. In terms of effect on GDP, we boosted the provincial GDP in 2019 by approximately 7 million, and our labor income was in the area of 4.2 million. Overall, with our employees, but also spin-off jobs, we supported 113 total jobs in the province. If you look longer term at those numbers, between 2003 and 2019, the provincial output generated by ACRI was 116 million. The impact on GDP was 66. The labor income was over 58 million, and the household spending in Greater Moncton and around the province was more than 43 million. Because most of the money that ACRI captures is spent in New Brunswick, there is a huge multiplier to our activities. And in 2019, we boosted the government's tax coffers by 1.8 million. And over the past 5 years, it's been over 10 million in local, provincial, and federal tax revenue. And that amount that David captured was about 83% of the total value of government grants that we received during that period. Another key milestone for the region was the construction of the new Center for Precision Medicine. That was a $25 million infrastructure project through the Strategic Infrastructure Program back in 2016. The construction boosted the GDP by 15.7 million. There were over 200 jobs that were sustained during the construction with about 3.6 million in tax revenue. So that was during construction. The important legacy that we have from that construction is that it provides ACRI and our partners, the University of Moncton, the Vitality Health Network, and others with a sound infrastructure and capabilities to grow, which we had pretty much reached our ceiling previously. In terms of ACRI in our sector, we were 8 times larger than the average organization in terms of GDP impact. That was a huge surprise. I'd have to talk to David to understand those numbers more clearly, but it is a significant difference compared to other R&D organizations in the province. In the past 5 years, we represented 16% of the entire GDP from all organizations in all sectors of R&D in the province. If you look at our workforce, the 65 or so HQP that are working at ACRI represent 11% of the entire workforce in R&D in the province. And we have people with the entire spectrum of from bachelor's degrees to master's to PhDs to postdocs in our sector. Our workers earn above average wages. Our average annual salary is approximately $50,000. Our workforce is very young, second only to defense services that has a lower average age than the R&D sector. And you can see those numbers here. So we're second after defense and above all other sectors in terms of youthfulness of our talent pool. If you look at where our employees come from. 2/3 of our employees come from elsewhere, outside of the Atlantic region. We have team members from a dozen different countries on 5 continents. Over half our workforce is female. And if you look at the entire sector, the 2/3 that are coming from outside of the region is triple the average of all other industries. So David's conclusion is that over the past 20 years, we've become a champion for R&D, and we've attained scale that allows us to compete, but also partner with others at the national and international level. And his conclusion is that if the province wants to succeed in R&D, we need R&D organizations that have attained scale, that can go out and attract funding and partnerships beyond our borders here in New Brunswick. If you look at New Brunswick in the Canadian context, it starts to show why we need to do more of this. This is a per capita investment by CIHR. CIHR is the largest health research funding organization in the country. If you look at the per capita numbers, you can see that some provinces do very well per capita. New Brunswick is more at the tail end, with $19 per person invested by CIHR in the province. And that is a reflection, I've looked at these numbers before in the past, it's a reflection of the number of people in the R&D sector that we have. We have very few researchers that are competing for federal funds compared to other provinces on a per capita basis. If you look at our export when it comes to R&D, this is what organizations produce and sell. Again, we're pretty much at the bottom of the list. Other organizations do much better, and there's probably a direct correlation between the capture of funds from research organizations and the translation of that into inter-provincial and international export revenues. So you're at the bottom of one, chances are you're going to be at the bottom of the other one as well. Now, why is this occurring? If you look at the other provincial governments between 2014 and 2018, those provincial governments provided an average of 35% of total funding to their R&D organizations. For ACRI, maybe a benchmark for New Brunswick, over that period, New Brunswick government committed 12% of our total funding, mostly through NBIF and NBHRF. So a significant gap compared to the other provincial governments' averages. If you look at over the past 15 years, 16 years, that average is slightly higher at 16%. Mind you, we've grown in terms of size as well. So when we were smaller, that number was a bigger percentage overall. So when it comes to expenditures in R&D, as a percentage of GDP, New Brunswick ranks last in Canada. And Canada is slightly below the OECD average. So if we were to flip it around, put it in another perspective, if New Brunswick was to spend at the Canadian average of investment in R&D per GDP, it would mean there'd be another 200 million per year in New Brunswick alone in R&D spending. And if we reach the OECD average of R&D and expenditures, that would mean 400 million more per year. So here's the table that shows R&D investment as a percentage of GDP in 2016. And as you can see, Canada is in the middle of the pack, and you can see the Canadian provinces as well. So Canada's at 1.7. The top investors are more in the 2.5 or over, and New Brunswick is at 1. And there's a couple other provinces at 1, but David explains that because of their overall investment compared to the population size, that actually means more in those provinces. So getting to the conclusion, if New Brunswick is to succeed in R&D, organizations like ACRI need to succeed. And to do that, we need to close the gap compared to other provinces and other countries when it comes to investing in R&D. this is a new economy. It's the innovation and knowledge economy, and we cannot stand on the sidelines and not participate if we want to compete with other jurisdictions. I think that completes my presentation.
Thank you very much to both of you. This is, to me, is fantastic that we have this right here in Greater Moncton, and we need to try to capitalize on the assets that we have and the great technology and minds that we have here in Greater Moncton. I do have a couple of questions that have come in. Let me just pull them up. So the first question actually comes from John Wishart. And he's asking, what are the biggest challenges to further commercialization of this technologies? What role should or can the province play in further assisting this? So I'll allow either one of you if you want to comment.
I can start probably. So I think we have examples coming from other provinces. So we have to see the examples that work and try to have similar, at our level, of course, we have a small population compared to, for example, Ontario or Quebec, but we can see what is done there. And since if we see the numbers that were given by Dr. Rodney Wallet, we can see that these provinces are having a good result. So we have to see what they are doing and try to do something here that can work and that can help in providing. Like probably there is something missing. For example, when we develop technology, there is potential for commercialization, for IP transfer, for developing probably startups and things like that. We have to see what is the best way to develop that and be successful. I think there is a lot of work to be done here, and there is a lot of opportunities that are there, and we can probably find ways to commercialize. But in this case, as the question was how the government can help and how the province can help, I think the province need to be involved and have strategies in some important fields that everybody knows that there is future there. I can talk, of course, I talk about AI because I am in AI, but I mean, everybody agrees that AI, there is a lot of potential. Like for example, AI for health, the market growth in the coming years, like the study of markets and markets, they are talking about starting with today we are close to $4 billion investment in AI for health, and by 2026 we will be close to 45 billion, I think, which is more than 10 times today's investment. So there is opportunities here that probably we need just strategy, and the government must be involved in these kind of strategies to help, I mean, stimulate the creation of new companies and commercialization of these technologies.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wallet. I know you and I have had those discussions about the fact that we have the precision medicine and the Cancer Research Institute and EI, and also even what the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is doing right across, and creating that cluster, and that there's models in Europe that we can replicate to do something similar here. So I just wanted you to, if you wanted to comment a little bit about what's being done in Europe that maybe we should be looking at and creating here.
Well, I think the key, without going into specific examples, I think the key here is what you allude to is critical mass. I think if you look at New Brunswick numbers, it's not necessarily pointing the finger at anybody. I think the fact that our capture of funding, if funding is a metric, is low because we don't have a lot of critical mass. So what's going on here in Moncton, but elsewhere in the province, is we're starting to grow that critical mass. Having clusters in different areas like fisheries and health and other areas of biology or artificial intelligence allows us to work better together and to build, to start using each other's skill sets. For example, a lot of organizations in New Brunswick, if they need services or technologies in the science field, will typically turn to Toronto. So we'll go to Genome Canada in Toronto and ask them to do our sequencing for us. What we're doing when we do that is, one, we're not building the expertise here, and we're sending our very precious R&D dollars to Ontario. So if we can use almost a shop at home and work collaboratively here, we'll be able to keep our investments here, grow our teams here, and the outcomes will slowly start to change. I think as well that the different levels of government need to have a unified strategy around this. We can't be doing one thing provincially, one thing federally, and one thing locally. I don't think that is very strategic if we adopt that type of model. Companies, it's hard in some of the fields that we're working in medicine and AI to have local companies, since we don't have a biotech sector to invest. But I mean, if hopefully in the future, if we start populating the beginnings of a cluster in this area, we'll get companies that will go to academics and try and develop new products and bring those products to market going forward.
And at the Precision Medicine building, you do have bioincubators currently in the building, I believe?
Yes, the concept included space, both definite space where companies could come in and set up and work closely with the research team, but there's also embedded space. So space within our laboratories for perhaps even smaller startups that don't necessarily have the means to rent physical space. They could come in and have access to some of our technology platforms and work with some experts in the field as well. So I think that's going to be a key spark for what will come from this in terms of economic development, is to allow the private sector to sidle up with what's going on in the center and use some of the great technology that's there.
So I do have a couple of other questions. There's another question here. How do we convince the holders of those purses, the purse strings, to move R&D spending up?
I think we should show them the numbers. I mean, if that doesn't do anything, I mean, we're not succeeding. I mean, we need to be competitive. And one of the challenges is that this is not an isolated area. If we're talking about health research, health research is important for training of our health professionals. It's important for attracting talented, health professionals from around the world. And if we're not competitive in R&D, we're not going to be competitive in bringing those people to New Brunswick. And those people will be caring for our parents, our loved ones. So it's all tied together. If we want, the best when it comes to healthcare, we need to invest in all aspects that attract the best talent to the region.
And my last question, since we are running out of time, is what role can private organizations play in partnership and support opportunities?
Yeah, I can ask part of the position of private sector is important. As you said, there are some examples there. I can give the example of in Montreal, there is Tandem Launch, which plays like a role of not an incubator, but it's like an incubator, but they are focusing on things like computer vision, artificial intelligence, and the way they work, they bring venture capital, private investors, and create from universities' IP a company or startup. So you have private sector involved. You have also some grants from the government, but since the private sector is involved, there is some interest that these things can bring some benefits in the future, and the results are there. Over the last years, they created a couple of companies in high technology, and some of them are becoming larger. So I think private sector can play an important role, and venture capital too. And we need that probably to stimulate the creation of startups in high technology.
If I can echo that, Susie, I'd just like to add the funding landscape. I've been following it now for 20 years. Having private sector involvement in a project, even if at any level, can make the difference from the same project being refused by organizations like ACOA and NBIF to a project that's approved. So the presence of the private sector in any shape or form is almost essential before going forward with some of the funding opportunities that are available.
Okay, great. Well, I have to thank you both. This was a lot of great information, and I hope that people joining us today, and especially the candidates moving forward into the election, found this very interesting, and that you are going to be our champions for Greater Moncton for this area of R&D. And so again, thank you very much. And so I just want to remind everyone that next Wednesday, September 9th, we will hold our last table series where the topic will be economic recovery. Our guest speakers will be Bill Hennessy from Colliers International, discussing retail, commercial, and hospitality sector. Alicia Ismad, entrepreneurship in residence from Ben. She's going to be discussing fintech. And Bernard LeBlanc from the Greater Moncton Romeo LeBlanc International Airport, and Jean-Marc Picard from the Atlantic Provinces Trucking Association. They're going to be discussing the transportation sector. So again, thank you very much. And please remember to vote September 14th. Thank you both, Dr. Ouellette and Dr. Aklov.